Ikki is a worthless, slow-brained bum about to get expelled from the Magic Academy for basically having no magic skills, despite the fact that he trains like David Goggins every day. But he soon discovers that he is roommates with the freaky and powerful princess. He starts training with her to become the strongest while she becomes obsessed with his glizzy. But before this, the one known as the weakest prepares for a workout and listens to a breathless TMZ reporter yap about the strongest princess from the little empire next door, who has just enrolled into his academy. He immediately shuts it off, since a loser like him will never be on the same level as her. But several minutes later, after a quick run, he remembers when an old master was gaslighting him, saying that there was still hope for worthless weaklings like him. He then summons his sword and spends a couple more minutes training before returning to his room and spotting an unfamiliar pair of boots. The next moment, he sees Princess Stella dressed like she is ready to ride the pony, so he immediately flexes his shredded abs to help set the mood.
Daddy, chill.
What the heck?
Shortly after this, he ends up in Principal Kurono's office, and after reminding him that the school is already struggling to keep a good reputation, she asks why he would be so stupid as to think a princess would be interested in him. He then claims he was just trying to make her comfortable and proceeds to apologize before promising to do whatever she wants to earn her forgiveness. After saying that she had already considered turning him into a world-famous creep, Stella agrees to let it slide if he unalives himself. But he immediately refuses and says there is no way she expects him to go that far over a simple mistake. All of a sudden, she lights up like a gas plant about to explode, so Kurono wishes Ikki luck and steps out for her own safety. Ikki immediately tries to calm Stella down, but she continues promising to roast his sausage for peeping at her hot bod until he suddenly admits that he couldn't take his eyes off because of how good she looked. The sudden compliment causes Little Miss Fireball to cool off, as she never expected a loser to have more riz than Duke Dennis. But then he also reminds her that she was the one who mistakenly entered his room first. As she tries to argue about it again, Kurono returns to explain that they are actually roommates and takes them back to the dorm building to show that their name tags have already been placed. This confuses Ikki, so he asks why the most powerful student is being paired with him, since students are usually paired with people on the same level as them. Stella then says he has to at least be close to her A rank status, but he explains that he is actually F ranked and had to repeat a year because he has the weakest ability in the entire academy. Kurono further explains that this is why they paired them together, since there is no one weaker than him and also no one on the same level as Stella. But Princess Fireball still turns it into an issue and says she will only stay if he sleeps outside the door. As Ikki tries to talk some sense into her, Kurono suggests having a duel to decide who gets to make the rules, and he easily accepts this. When Stella asks why he would want to fight someone clearly out of his league, he tells her not to worry because he spends a lot of time working on his useless ability. Stella then agrees to fight him but takes things a step further by saying that whoever loses has to become the winner's servant. Hours later, they both arrive at a battle arena for the duel, and Stella starts by suggesting that he give up his dream of becoming a knight, since he barely has any points, but he refuses and says he believes his hard work will pay off one day. This causes her to remember the day she defeated a knight and had to listen to him cry about all the time he spent training, like she was just handed her abilities. While Kurono explains the rules of the duel, other students flock into the arena to watch the fight, since they have almost never seen an A-ranked fighter like Stella. However, after they both summon their swords, Stella initiates the first attack and almost incinerates our weak MC. But he dodges and focuses all his energy on blocking her strikes. After yapping about how he would have become barbecue wings if he tried to take the attack head-on, she asks if he plans to run until the end, so he decides to go on the offense and uses her own move to force her back. She gets shocked by this and asks how he already copied it perfectly, so he explains how he spends most of his time perfecting his blade steel skill since no one offered to really train him. After a couple more minutes of copying, He finally lands a hit but sees that she has finally activated her defense magic, so he jumps back and asks if she always planned to use her magic from the start. Stella then admits that she initially wanted to defeat him with her sword skills alone, so people would stop saying that she is lucky to have an amazing ability. The next moment, she powers up to use her full abilities and unleashes a flaming dragon to end him. But he suddenly becomes the Flash and dashes across the arena at light speed to dodge every move before landing a brutal slice that knocks her out. Later on, Kurono enters the infirmary to check on her and explains that he is also worn out because the skill he used can only be activated for a minute and drains all his energy for a day. When Stella asks why someone like him is still in the F rank, Kurono reminds her that the ranking system only focuses on magic ability instead of real combat skills. She also reminds Stella of the conversation they had in the car about how she chose the academy to grow stronger and says that working with Ikki will help her achieve that goal. Shortly after that, she gets back to the room and finds him sleeping, so she tries to touch his back but ends up trapped when he turns over. After sitting on his glizzy to get free, his abs melt the brain cells she has left, so she rubs it and experiences a feeling that opens the floodgates.
Get naked, you strange whore!
When he suddenly wakes up and asks why she is making unholy sounds, she jumps off and slams her head into the ceiling.
Yeah, this is awkward, I know.
Moments later, he places a plaster over the bruise and reminds her of their deal, which means she now has to become his servant. She immediately starts rambling about how he probably just wants her to do freaky stuff, but he tells her to relax because he just wants her to be open to building a relationship as his roommate.
What? Oh, come on, man.
Upon seeing the hesitant look on her face, he offers to talk to Kurono if she doesn't want it, but she agrees to it on the condition that he has to call her by her regular name. Early the next day, Ikki's hot little sister, Shizuku, boards a train for the academy while he takes a break from running to sip his drink. When Stella finally catches up to him, he tells her to stop trying so hard to get on his level, but she claims it's no big deal despite the fact that her lungs are about to explode. He then offers her some of his drink, but she realizes that he just drank from it and asks why he is trying to get an indirect kiss. He immediately tells her not to worry if she is not comfortable with it, but the closeted freak immediately grabs the bottle and locks lips with the same spot he drank from.
Naughty, naughty.
After drinking, she notices the smile on his face and asks why he is so happy, so he tells her about Shizuku's enrollment and how excited she has been to see him. Stella then asks if she is one of those sisters he likes to get freaky with, but he promises that they have a perfectly normal relationship. In class later that morning, a teacher named Yuri struggles to keep herself awake while welcoming them to the new session and reminds them of the tournament kicking off in a week to decide which students are strong enough to represent the academy. After Stella asks for more detail on the fights, Yuri tries to motivate them with a chant but suddenly throws up all the blood in her body. At the infirmary minutes later, she tells Stella not to worry because she usually vomits a liter of blood every day.
Wait, what?
But Ikki still tells her to be careful before explaining to Stella that Yuri is part of the reason he could enroll into the academy. After she says something about how last year was unfair for him, they both head out and Stella asks what she meant, so he tries to explain how there was no grading system for magic before he enrolled. However, when a four-eyed hottie named Kagami suddenly stuffs his arm into her jugs and claims to be his biggest fan, Stella forgets about her first question and demands to know when he became a Riz master. He then asks Kagami who she is, so she proceeds to explain how she became obsessed after watching their duel and asks if he would like to be the hot topic on her next gossip podcast for the school. After promising to talk about it later, he tries to catch up with Stella, but then Shizuku finally shows up and claims to have missed him deeply before suddenly forcing him down for a steamy kiss. As all the other students freeze in shock, Kagami starts capturing every angle of the kiss, while Stella completely flips and asks what kind of creepy relationship they both have. Shizuku completely ignores that she even exists and tries to get another kiss, so Stella pulls her away and asks Ikki why he lied when he said they have a normal relationship. As he tries to explain himself, Shizuku switches over to demon mode and asks Stella what gives her the right to interfere with her freaky sibling reunion, so Stella proudly claims to be his servant.
Say what?
Once again, Kagami starts writing titles for her next IG post while Ikki struggles to preserve his reputation. But Stella only makes matters worse by claiming they even had a special workout in his bed last night.
Why don't you explain what that is so they can understand?
Yeah,
Just explain what that is.
Explain what you think that is.
Okay.
Just explain that.
Upon hearing this, Shizuku summons her sword to murk Stella, but she also summons her sword to fight for Ikki's heart, and they both end up destroying the hallway. Minutes later, Kurono takes them to one of the restrooms and says they have to spend the entire day cleaning as punishment, but they still continue roasting each other until Shizuku arrives at her dorm building. When Stella tells her to stop acting like her relationship with Ikki is that special, she gets pissed and tells Stella that she will never understand how he felt after years of being neglected by everyone else in their family. This surprises Stella, so she tries to ask for more details, but Shizuku says it's none of her business before entering her room and meeting her roommate, Alice. Shortly after that, Stella runs into Ikki on his way back from training and gives him a sports drink before asking if his family really neglected him. He spits the drink out in shock, but after she says Shizuku mentioned it, he decides to tell her about his tragic life. For starters, he reminds her of the legendary samurai, Ryama, that saved Japan in the Great War and says that he is actually his great-grandfather. Turns out his family is actually very famous for producing the strongest blazers in the country. But because he was born with nothing but Riz, everyone in the family treated him like a worthless peasant. After years of neglect, he decides to leave the house one day, but that was almost his last mistake because a blizzard suddenly picked up that evening and almost sent him up to the Lord. Just as he was about to collapse, the frustration from being treated like nothing caused him to get pissed. And Ryama, who had just finished training, noticed this, so he told Ikki to use the frustration as fuel and keep fighting. Because of this, he started training as hard as he could all alone. But after enrolling into the academy, his family convinced the previous principal to start grading students based on their magical abilities just so he would not graduate. This sob story causes Stella to think they are the same, since she also trained alone for years, so she promises to help him level up in any way she can. Meanwhile, Shizuku has also finished telling Alice all about her obsession with Ikki's glizzy, but instead of calling the psych ward, he promises to act like her big sister whenever she needs someone to talk to. While making dinner a couple hours later, Stella decides to join Ikki in the shower. To save water, of course.
Why not? Come on in.
And he almost passes out the moment she walks in. But she convinces him to sit so she can wash his back like a true servant. He manages to remain composed through this, but things take a freaky turn when she drops the sponge to use her milkers instead. Like that isn't enough, the plot cover drops all of a sudden, causing him to feel the real thing while Stella turns bright red in embarrassment.
Oh, mama. Get a room, you two.
We're in a room.
Well, then lose some weight.
After an intense training session several days later, Stella tells Ikki that she has already received an email about her first tournament match. But when he tries to tell her about the opponent, she stops him and claims to like it when she doesn't know anything about her opponent, because that worked so well last time. Ikki then agrees that it would be good practice to prepare for real fights against unknown enemies in the future. When he suddenly says that they have the best relationship in the academy, her face sets on fire as she tries to hide how it makes her feel. But then he stands up to return to class. She then stops him and struggles to find a way to ask him out, while he watches with a stupid smile on his face like he doesn't know what she is about to say. Just then, he receives a text, so Stella looks to see if it's for the tournament, only to get heartbroken when they see that it's just Shizuku asking him to hang out tomorrow. She immediately tries to counter with her own proposal, but he quickly sends a response to Shizuku, so she accepts defeat. However, she still ends up following him to the hangout tomorrow, and when Shizuku asks why she is always meddling in their affairs, she claims it is because he is the only person she knows in the academy. Ikki, on the other hand, gets confused by Alice's choice of dressing and wonders why Shizuku is hanging out with a zesty creep, until he introduces himself and admits that he wants to take his pickle for a spin. After stopping Shizuku from starting another fight, they all head out, but upon arriving at the shopping mall, Stella notices that the freaky siblings have been holding hands, so she tells Shizuku to stop. Shizuku then says they have always held hands, and as soon as Stella asks to hold his hand as well, she reminds her to stay in her place as his servant.
Oh, honey.
Girl, security.
When she suddenly asks if Stella has any special feelings that make her want to hold his hand, Stella completely denies it, so Shizuku heads into the mall with him while she desperately tries to keep her anger under control. Moments later, the girls try to enjoy a nice parfait, but then Ikki suddenly leans towards Shizuku to eat a piece of it from her face, causing her to break character for the first time since she arrived. Stella then covers her entire face in parfait for him to eat from, but he decides to get her a towel instead.
Oh, don't cry, are you?
So Shizuku and Alice try to give her some tips to improve her game while a group of thugs start taking over the mall. At the men's room minutes later, Ikki thanks Alice for building trust with Shizuku because she has always had issues with being around strangers. After Alice promises to keep looking out for her, Ikki tries to leave, but Alice suddenly stops him before one of the goons enters and covers the entire bathroom with bullets. After the second reminds him of their boss's orders to take every hostage alive, Yakin tells him not to worry since no one was inside, so they both head out. Ikki and Alice then step out of one of his handy portals before he unlocks a couple more to sneak around the mall so they can figure out what happened. At the surveillance room moments later, Alice monitors their movements while Ikki calls Kurono, who then tells him to keep everyone safe because law enforcement is still on their way and won't be able to do anything since the goons are asking for money in exchange for the lives of the hostages. While he and Alice come up with a plan, Shizuku asks Stella to buy her some time so she can activate a powerful skill. But the Mohawk ambassador suddenly attacks a lady for trying to speak to him. When her son tries to attack him for hurting his mum, Yakin eats him across the floor and tries to send him back to his ancestors, but Stella steps in to melt the bullets with her heat. Despite seeing that the gun is useless against her, this slow-brained idiot continues shooting until his boss, Bishu, tells him to stop. After he greets Stella and apologizes for hiring dimwits who fail to realize that they are in the presence of royalty, he decides to punish the boy's mother for raising such a disrespectful brat. Stella immediately summons her sword and jumps toward him to attack, but he uses it to his advantage and absorbs her attack before rearranging her organs with a brutal release of energy. He then explains how his device basically uses another blazer's power against them and offers to spare the lady's life if Stella apologizes with her plots on display.
Yes! Yes!
Upon hearing this, Ikki tries to interfere, but Alice stops him because Shizuku still needs time. After Stella takes off the clothes, Bishu reminds her that they have to see everything, so she reaches for her plot armor, and Alice quickly uses his shadow bind skill to stop Ikki from attacking. Just then, Shizuku finally activates the barrier, so Ikki uses his skill to track every bullet at super speed before jumping off the edge to attack. Like before, Bishu prepares to absorb his attack, but Ikki slices off his entire arm instead. After Stella knocks out the rest of the goons, Ikki rushes over to hug her and suddenly takes a knee as the effects of his skill zap his energy level. All of a sudden, a female goon who is hiding among the hostages holds another person at gunpoint and orders them to surrender, but she gets taken out by a magic arrow before a student named Shizuya reveals himself. Shortly after that, he takes all the credit for saving the hostages, and when Ikki walks over to thank him, he starts asking why he is still in the academy since he will never become a knight with his useless skill. Upon hearing this, Stella walks over to tell him that Ikki is way stronger than him, but Shizuya starts laughing and asks if she is talking about the same Ikki that ran away from their first duel. He then tells Ikki that it's finally time to settle the scores, so Ikki checks his mail and sees that Shizuya is his first opponent in the tournament. The following week, Stella kicks off the tournament by defeating her armored opponent with a simple stare down. Hours later, she nearly experiences a heart attack when Kagami suddenly rushes into the dressing room to congratulate all three of them on winning their first fights. While Stella tries to cover her massive plot cannons, Alice gets intrigued by Kagami's job as the school's top reporter and starts scheming to spill the tea with her. Later on, Stella finds Ikki watching videos of Shizuya's previous fights and explains how much she hates his style of fighting. When Ikki says he would never go for someone like her, she asks why, so he explains how Shizuya only targets people his invisibility skill can damage. Stella then makes him promise to win no matter what. While jogging the next morning, he continues flashing back to a past incident with Shizuya until Alice shows up to talk. He immediately asks what Shizuya meant by calling him a coward, so Ikki starts by explaining how the previous principal wanted to expel him at all costs. On that day, Shizuya, who had already heard about the plan to expel him, used it as an opportunity to attack, knowing that he couldn't even defend himself. To avoid the expulsion, Ikki had to tolerate all the disrespect and allowed Shizuya to embarrass him in front of the entire school. After listening to everything, Alice tells Ikki to stop hiding from all the pain and anger he has forced away all these years before wishing him luck. Hours later, Stella suggests passing the time with something fun since he still has to wait a little longer before the fight. But he decides to pass on the offer to focus on his preparation. Shortly after that, he completes the sign-in, only to get a surprise visit from Nene, an old friend of Kurono. He quickly recognizes her and asks why she would be interested in him, so she moves closer and asks if he would be down for a late-night cuddle session. Just then, Kurono shows up and threatens to reunite her with God if she keeps flirting with students before dragging her away. In the waiting room moments later, Ikki tries to channel all his emotions into the fight, but he suddenly gets a panic attack right before they call him out to the arena. After Shizuya walks out and flexes his pearly whites to rizz up the ladies watching, Sato shows up and promises to pay him back for last time. As soon as they receive the signal to start, Shizuya turns the entire arena into his personal forest and activates his vanishing skill to remain concealed. However, Sato easily senses all his attacks and blocks them until Shizuya decides to take things up a notch. After another vanishing act, he starts shooting invisible arrows and targets the most painful parts of Ikki's body, causing him to struggle between trying to figure out what the hell is going on and resisting the pain. Upon seeing this, all the initial excitement from his evasive maneuvers turns to fear as Stella and the others try to figure out why he suddenly can't make a single move. When Stella asks why he didn't just go all out at the start, Alice says it's probably because he is nervous, and this reminds Stella of the previous evening when he put up a facade to make it seem like he was confident. While Shizuya continues inflicting damaging wounds across his body, Ikki gradually loses his stamina and confidence. To make matters worse, all the other students start laughing at him, so Shizuya delivers one final blast through his spine and joins the rest of the academy to insult him. Just then, Stella loses it and tells them all to stop roasting the guy she likes before reminding Ikki of all the time he spent training for this moment. After pulling himself back together and giving himself a punch to nudge his brain back into place, Ikki thanks her for the pep talk and activates the skill he should have used from the start. With this, he stops Shizuya's attack with his bare hands like the reincarnation of Neo, but Shizuya becomes convinced that it was just a fluke and bathes him in a flurry of invisible arrows. While blocking every single one of them, Ikki then activates his perfect vision skill to see every move and starts chasing after Shizuya to finish him off. All of a sudden, Mr. Steal Your Girl starts begging to be spared, but Ikki ignores him, so he tries every useless attack in his arsenal and still fails to land a single hit. Upon seeing that Ikki is about to make his final move, Shizuya destroys every ounce of aura he has by begging like a worthless peasant and admitting that he is scared of getting cut by a sword, but Ikki ignores this and attacks him anyway. Luckily for the hideous loser, Ikki misses his empty brain by a millimeter, so he faints from the shock, automatically giving Ikki the win. However, Ikki also passes out due to being exhausted and wakes up in the infirmary hours later to see that Stella fell asleep waiting for him. When she finally wakes up and attacks him for letting a loser deal so much damage, he apologizes for losing his edge and suddenly says he has feelings for her. She initially freezes in shock and eventually claims that she only said it back then to motivate him, but he tells her not to worry about feeling awkward because he just wanted to tell her how he felt. The next moment, she makes him close his eyes and leans in to give him a kiss on the cheek before admitting that she also has feelings for him. After our previously lonely MC gives her a tight hug, he promises to keep getting stronger until the day they face off against each other as the two strongest knights. 2 weeks later, Stella tries to get a quick training session in but continues thinking that Ikki has a shrimp because he hasn't tried to do anything freaky since they started dating. Meanwhile, he has just defeated his 5th opponent in the tournament and becomes a fan favorite for all the chicks on campus. In class the following day, Kagami throws her melons at him before asking if he can give lessons to her friends, so he tries to accept in a respectful way because Stella has been sending him death threats with her expressions. After Yuri ends the class by throwing up her blood cells again, they return to the dorm, and Stella asks if training all those girls is smart because they might become his opponents in the future. He then claims to be okay with it since it means he will have better fights and will also help the girls get better in case they end up in a situation like what happened in the mall. The following afternoon, he starts his first lesson with Kagami and some of her friends, but a bunch of guys from class suddenly interrupt and decide to beat him up until he returns to being a low-level NPC. The next moment, Ikki knocks them all down like a stack of dollar store dominoes and reminds them of the rule against fights outside the arena, when they suddenly start begging him for lessons so they can achieve the Duke Dennis level Riz he is currently using. He easily accepts, while Kagami struggles to accept that the wannabe thugs were actually jealous fanboys this entire time. After another group of baddies also show up and beg for lessons, Ikki takes them all to a new spot for lessons and tells Stella how happy he is to see them improving already. Stella then tries to give him one of the drinks she bought, but Shizuru beats her to it and yaps about how she is the best sister before giving him space to enjoy the drink. As soon as he finishes, she asks Stella why she has 2 drinks, so Stella claims they are both for her and proceeds to drink both bottles just to hide her obvious hunger for his meat stick. Love. After the second bottle, she asks to join his classes since he has already agreed to teach every baddie around. But when he hesitates to say yes, her insecurities flare up, so she tells him not to worry and storms off. While rambling on about how stupid he is, she runs into Alice, who just discovered the wonders of a new romance game and borrows it to play make-believe with herself in the room. Just as she gets to the good part, Ikki walks in to talk about a lesson he has with the girls, so she quickly tries to hide the game before refusing to go since he was so hesitant to say yes before. Despite this, she joins his fan club on the bus the next day and continues smiling like all is good with the world just because, after asking her to join them the previous evening, he explains that his initial hesitation to teach her was because she was already far beyond his level. He further claimed to like the fact that she is way out of his league because it keeps him on his toes, and she ended up folding because not even a goddess can withstand that level of Riz. At the pool later on, she and Shizuku start the usual argument over who gets to spend more time with him, while the guys from class express gratitude because they never expected to be in the same room with a bunch of hotties. As Ikki starts the lesson, Stella gets jealous again because he hasn't been spending enough time with her, so she decides to try out the underwater exercise to distract herself. However, just as she enters the zone, Kagami suddenly asks if they have clapped yet and almost causes her to drown. After helping her cough up the water, she asks the same question and says she has been dying to know how their relationship is going. But Stella denies dating him and says she would never fall in love with a peasant. Kagami then decides to date him instead, but Stella immediately confesses to being obsessed with him before explaining that they still haven't done anything freaky. Meanwhile, Shizuku has just asked Alice if he finds it weird that she wants to start an Alabama love story with Ikki, and this zesty creep lies just to make her think it's perfectly normal to be insane. Back at the fountain, Kagami learns all about Stella's boring relationship with Ikki, and after several minutes of convincing her to tell him what she really wants, she leaves and calls him to speak with her. Stella then asks for his opinion on her swimsuit, and after saying that he likes them, Ikki suddenly asks if their relationship is really okay at its current level. Instead of processing what he just said with her brain, Stella convinces herself that he has gotten tired of dating a boring chick that never tries to get freaky, so she tears up and tells him to leave if he wants. However, he gets confused by this and tries to explain what he meant, but she starts arguing about how he never tries to do anything romantic with her. The next moment, he also gets upset and argues about it until they both realize that they have been the one too slow to fulfill their fantasies. They then agree to say what they want together and end up sharing their first kiss. Hours later, they get on the bus to return to campus and both receive another fight email saying that their next opponents are members of the student council. The following afternoon, Ikki takes on a dollar store flash named Ren Ren, who continues yapping about how she is going to defeat him with her super speed until he knocks her down with one move. Shortly after that, Stella faces off against Seijo, another council member who also spends a couple of minutes. To nobody's surprise, she easily shatters his sword with a single strike, but her happiness quickly fades away when Shizuku shows up to steal her man a couple minutes later. When she finally speaks up and starts arguing with Shizuku, Alice tells Ikki about a chick that has been stalking him over the last few days, and he admits that he always knew but just wanted to let it slide since a lot of girls have been trying to straddle his glizzy recently. When he calls out to her, she suddenly freaks out and ends up falling into the water, so they take her to the infirmary where she explains that she has trouble speaking with boys.
What? Why? Why?
After Anne introduces herself, Ikki gets intrigued by her surname and asks if she is related to a famous samurai. So she explains that he is actually her father, while Shizuku tells Stella how her dad rose to fame as the most skillful swordsman despite not having any magical abilities. The next moment, Shizuku and Stella start demanding to know why she was stalking Ikki, and threaten to attack if she doesn't give them a good reason, so she admits to being fascinated by his sword skills and says she was just too shy to ask him for lessons. This causes Ikki to realize that his nonchalant Riz is causing top-level bang, that she is trying too hard to be on the same level as her dad. He reminds her that they have different body structures, which means she can't pull off his moves by copying every single thing he does. Anne immediately accepts that she has been the However, when he suddenly starts massaging her drumsticks and claims that it's all a part of the process, she starts fighting demons she never even knew existed, while Shizuku and Stella wonder why he never does that to them. After almost touching the no-no spot, Ikki gets back up and tells her to try a basic move she has been struggling with, so she takes the swing and realizes that he was right. She then grabs his hand to thank him for everything, but he tells her not to worry about it. On the way home a couple minutes later, Anne continues gushing over how big and strong Ikki's hands felt, and while he accepts the compliment, Stella gets jealous and asks Shizuku why she is not pissed off. When Shizuku explains that she will always be happy with anyone that manages to make Ikki smile, Stella realizes that she has been acting stupid this entire time and decides to let them share the moment together. However, as soon as she assures her that he only enjoyed helping her get stronger, since she has clearly spent a lot of time improving her skill. For the rest of the week, Stella then joins the training session to act like she also cares about Anne, when she is really just trying to keep her vanilla buns away from Ikki. Days later, Stella manages to look like a Victoria's Secret model while eating like a starved hippo. The next moment, a group that looks like they would make the loss for most likely to drop out interrupts their dinner to talk trash. Naturally, Ikki tries to avoid any confrontation with them, but then the leader, Kurado, suddenly pours him a drink as an apology, only to smash the bottle on Ikki's head. Claims it's no big deal despite the heavy stream of blood leaking from his skull. This causes Kurado smiling instead of defending his pride, so Kurado heads out with his squad. Just then, a fun-sized tweep named Misogi shows up to tell them that Kurado is one of the strongest blazers in a rival school. Another weirdo named Kanata, who thinks it's Paris Fashion Week, shows up to support Misogi. Moments later, Ikki tries to figure out how Misogi healed the cut on his head, but Stella becomes more curious about Kurado's gang and asks Anne why they all seem to know her, but she remains quiet. The day before the fight, he meets up with the girls at the usual training ground, and they all start to worry about Anne's true intentions because she stopped hanging out with them after the mail came in. Later on, Alice takes Ikki aside to warn him that after she asks if he plans to fight Stella again in the tournament. He tells her about the promise they both made to face off at the top again, and says he will only fight fair to get there, even if he ends up losing in the process. Anne then tells him that she would do whatever it takes to win before summoning her sword and tearing a hole through the fence. As soon as she falls back, Ikki activates his most powerful skill to catch up to her and ends up using every ounce of energy he had to kick off from the wall. Moments later, they get out of the water and he tries to ask if she has actually lost her mind, but then she confesses that it was all just a plan to make him use his signature move because he can only use it once every day, which means he won't be able to use it during their fight.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Our stupid MC then realizes that Alice was right and tries to ask why she would go this far just to win, but she ignores him and walks off while he collapses into a puddle of water. Minutes later, Stella starts dreaming about all the freaky stuff she wants to do with him, but when he falls into her belly, she wakes up and asks if he finally wants to make her dreams come true.
You need to relax.
However, after getting no response, she realizes that her man is fighting for his life and rushes him down to the infirmary. The following day, the rest of the gang pull up to check on him, and after he explains what happened, Kurono asks for a moment of his time. She then shows them the building he destroyed while trying to save Anne and asks for all the details, but he skips the part where Anne's perfect face turns off his brain and asks for a punishment instead. When she asks if he is trying to cover for someone, he asks for details on Anne's past instead, so she tells him how her dad lost his dojo and ended up in a comatose state after a duel with Kurado. Afterwards, he and the girls realize that Ayan is desperate to enter the tournament so she can win back her dad's dojo from Kurado, but Shizuku still insists that she didn't have to betray him like that. Despite this, Ikki still decides to do his best during the fight but asks Stella to help him with something very important before it begins. Hours later, the arena gets packed as usual, but this time, Yuri decides to serve as the commentator and even brings a pack of blood to refuel every time she vomits. After Ikki and Ayan both step out for the duel, she apologizes in advance and reminds him of her promise to do whatever it takes to win. Ikki then summons his sword and immediately charges into attack, but after suddenly receiving multiple cuts across his body, he jumps back to figure out what happened only to receive another deadly slice across his back. Upon seeing this, the girls get worried and struggle to understand what Ayan just did since no one has ever seen her using her abilities. Alice, on the other hand, realizes that she must have set traps all around the arena before the match, which would mean an instant disqualification and win for Ikki if Yuri finds out. However, Ikki, who has also noticed what she did, continues fighting like nothing happened and manages to dodge one of the traps, causing Ayan to fear that they might soon see through her ability. She then speeds up her attack and manages to land a deep cut that drops him to his knees. To make matters worse, she starts targeting his vital organs to end it all, but he manages to dodge every hit until she realizes that he has been playing chess while she was playing mahjong. After she jumps back to figure out his next move, he thinks back to when he told Yuri to ignore her cheating. She initially thought the blood loss was affecting her senses and asked him to repeat it, so he explained how Ayan is just a good girl desperate to get what was stolen from her family. Stella was also surprised to hear that he wanted to let her get away with cheating, but he convinced them to accept it and promised to make sure Ayan remembers what it means to be a fighter. Back in the arena, he tries talking some sense into her head, but she still insists on doing whatever it takes to win, so he decides to talk with a sword instead and charges in. She immediately tries to activate her traps, but he easily evades every attack, so she remembers her sick dad and uses the last bit of energy to blow him up. However, he still dodges it and knocks her down with the dull edge of his blade. Upon realizing that he didn't even hit her for real, she tries to get back up, but her legs decide to take a nap, so she asks Ikki why he didn't finish her off. Mr. Mature then gives her a long speech about the honor of being a true samurai and offers to help her get back what she lost if she agrees to be his student again. The next moment, little Miss Independence starts bawling her eyes out and begs him for help, so he takes her hand and promises to train her again. She then spends the rest of the evening watching over her dad and reminiscing on all the times he trained her. Early the next day, Ikki and Stella head towards her dad's dojo to help her get it back, and while walking, they discuss all the fights Kurado has been involved in. When Ayan tells them that he didn't even use his ability against her dad, Ikki refuses to believe it because there is no way the legendary samurai went down against someone who didn't even go all out. Ayan then decides to give them the full story and explains how the entire dojo watched in shock that night as Kurado kept forcing her dad back until he had to take a knee. They told him to forfeit the fight since it was already looking bad, but he refused and said he had to make Kurado pay for disrespecting them. After enduring another series of attacks, Kaido fell back again but warned Ayan against interfering before telling Kurado to prepare for his ultimate technique. Kurado casually dismissed his warnings, so Kaido charged in to finish him off, but just as he got close, his heart failed and gave Kurado an edge to take him down. In an instant, the once feared samurai was paralyzed in Ayan's arms and could only apologize before passing out. Shortly after the trip down memory lane, they all arrive at the dojo, but when Ikki asks Kurado's boys where he is, they all decide to attack him. However, just a few minutes later, he walks into the dojo and challenges Kurado to a duel. The obnoxious thug immediately reminds him of what happened at the restaurant the other night and asks if he finally found his balls, so Ikki explains that it's illegal for students to use their weapons off campus. Kurado then says he will only accept his challenge if he proves himself as a strong opponent, so Ikki drops the phones he collected from his currently unconscious boy band. Upon seeing this, Kurado summons his sword and accepts the duel, so Ikki summons his as well and immediately starts defending from his insanely powerful strikes. Upon seeing that he can easily handle the basic moves, Kurado activates the second form of his sword and finally manages to land a small cut, but this finally gives Ikki all the information he needs to understand his skill. After he explains how Kurado's brain is essentially running on rocket fuel to react in milliseconds, Kurado tells him to accept defeat because knowing his skill won't help him get fast enough to dodge it. He then proceeds to speed up his attack even more to the point where Ikki starts running back just to keep up. After taking a nasty cut to the chest, Kurado gives him a moment to take in the defeat, but Ikki gets even more excited to fight and continues clashing sword with him. Anne then starts to worry that he will end up like her dad, but when she tries to interfere, Stella holds her back and helps her realize that Ikki is actually enjoying the beatdown. As they both continue watching, she asks if her dad regretted the fight, and after Anne says that there is no way he didn't, Stella tells her to consider the fact that he was actually excited because no one else had dared to challenge him for years. Anne then thinks back to that night again and remembers that Kaido was actually smiling throughout the entire duel, so she drops to her knees for dramatic effect and accepts that she is a slow-brained Sakura copycat who didn't even know what it meant to be a true swordsman. The next moment, Ikki forces Kurado's sword into the ground so they can both take a moment to catch their breaths. However, after he admits that no one has even made him this excited in a duel, Kurado resumes his attacks, so Ikki takes a huge step back and promises to get the dojo back before charging up to use Kaido's secret technique. Kurado also enters flow state and summons the most dangerous form of his sword, but after seeing the way Ikki casually charges into attack, he remembers the night he defeated Kaido and gets excited to finally see his special move. The next moment, Ikki speeds past him with an almost invincible slice that leaves Kurado frozen in shock while his blood leaks out. As Ikki casually gets back up like nothing happened, both Stella and Anne start wishing he can give them his other sword, but the real shock sets in when Kurado pulls himself back up and agrees to give up the dojo. However, he also promises Ikki a rematch during the national tournament before leaving. After Ikki falls into Stella's arms, Anne apologizes for everything she has put him through and says she doesn't even deserve to take over the dojo. But naturally, Ikki deceives her into thinking that pathetic cheaters should definitely run a family business, so she thanks him for the encouragement and immediately starts cleaning up. The following afternoon, the virgin lovebirds find a spot to sit and talk about how Anne turned herself in for cheating and gladly accepted the 10-day suspension. They then try to enjoy being a couple for once, but Shizuku and Alice decide to interrupt, so they start acting like they were not about to smash while Anne spends time with Kaido because he finally decided to stop sleeping. A couple days later, Ikki wins his 12th match in the tournament, and as a reward for all his hard work, Kurono sends him on a trip to the Academy's training camp along with Stella. On a bus the following day, Stella expresses how excited she is to finally get some alone time with him and immediately starts coming up with plans after seeing a huge waterfall. Meanwhile, Shizuku, who is currently on another train with Alice, calls herself a failure for not keeping Ikki away from his freaky girlfriend. When Alice tells her to cheer up, she asks if he will at least follow her back home, but he apologizes for disappointing her because he already has an appointment to attend to. A little while later, the lovebirds get off the bus and start walking towards the training compound, but then Ikki notices that Stella might be feeling a little cold, so he offers his jacket like a true gentleman. Like always, the unloved virgin starts acting all surprised like they haven't been dating for over a month, and our clueless MC also gets flustered since they never get to do anything romantic despite living in the same room. The next moment, they spot the student council members and quickly take their stances for a fight, only for Stella to end up using her powers to play against Ren in an intense game of badminton. While watching with the others, Ikki asks if they usually just leave school to play sports, but they claim to actually have important business in the training camp, and asks why he is acting clueless since they both came for the same reason. This confuses Ikki until a couple minutes later when they start cleaning the entire facility and explain that Kurono only sent them to serve as substitute janitors. While Stella starts regretting the decision to trust Kurono, Shizuku makes it back to the family house and immediately locks herself inside to play with her cat. Hours later, Stella and Ikki finish with the cleaning and decide to go see the waterfall from earlier, so Ren and the others wish them luck and secretly hope they will finally find the balls to revoke their V cards. Shortly after that, they both get to the trail leading to the waterfall, but Ikki notices that Stella seems a little slow, so he asks if she needs help, but she tells him not to worry about it. Minutes later, he asks again and remembers that she only had 2 bowls of food, which doesn't make sense since she usually swallows an entire buffet for breakfast. She then tries to act like she doesn't have the digestive system of a whale, but he tells to stop the cap and explain what is actually going, so she tells him about a fever she noticed before they left. When she suddenly asks if their first kiss made her pregnant, He realizes that her brain is stuck somewhere in the evolution cycle and explains that they need to do a lot more than kiss to make that happen. However, upon seeing that her fever is getting worse, he decides to skip the biology lesson to help her back to camp, but it suddenly starts raining, so he frantically tries to find shelter while a low-budget adaptation of Robin Hood stalks them. Moments later, he lights a fire in an abandoned shed to keep her warm and suggests taking her shirt off since it's already soaked, but she hesitates, so he takes the first step by stripping down to his shorts. She then remembers how they first met and claims to be finally comfortable with him seeing her plot cannons before laying down to start with her socks. However, upon seeing that she is too weak to take it off, he offers to help and prays that his meat stick stays cool before proceeding to pull her socks off. After also helping with her shirt, he commends himself on managing to stay in control, but then she asks if he can also help with her melon wraps. Despite feeling the urge to grab her melons instead, he quickly takes off the plot armor and covers her with a blanket. But then she apologizes for stressing him out because she noticed his magic stick pointing in her direction the entire time. After looking down and seeing that little Johnny is awake, he covers it up and apologizes, but she tells him not to worry before asking if he wants to take things to the next level.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm! What's the procedure, everyone?
Once again, this virgin idiot freaks out over a simple question and takes a long time to think.
May do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Before saying that he wants to wait for the right time, instead of just admitting that he doesn't last more than 2 seconds. Just as she tries to act like his decision is perfectly normal, a call comes in from Ren, so he steps out to take it while she lays back and wonders if he will ever put in his big boy pants and clap her cheeks. By then, Shizuku has just been summoned by her dad Itsuki, but she continues trying to avoid a conversation until he congratulates her on winning all 12 matches she has been in. When she reminds him that Ikki is also undefeated and asks if his success means anything at all to the family, Itsuki tries to act like he cares, but she sees through the cap and heads back to her room. By then, Ikki has just heard loud footsteps outside, so he goes to take a look and suddenly sees a golem about to smash the cabin. Using his super speed skill, he quickly saves Stella and slices right through the golem, but after its shattered bits turn into an army of rock soldiers, he gets scared since he won't be able to make it back to Stella in time. Thankfully, Ren and the others show up to help them, but they also get overwhelmed by the rock army until the council president finally shows up. Using a hand-me-down version of Sentisu's lighting slash, she rips through the entire army in seconds and focuses on tracing the magic source controlling them before hitting it with an intense lightning storm that fries the magic user controlling them. Despite this, the human walrus masterminding the attack gets even more excited to plan his next attack, while Ikki becomes obsessed with Tauka's beauty and realizes why she is regarded as the most powerful in the entire academy. Shizuku checks her mail and sees that Tauka is her next opponent. The day before the match, she reminisces on what it felt like growing up in a rich family where her every wish was granted simply because she had magical abilities. The fact that no one ever dared to deny her wishes or correct her wrongs fueled her hatred for all of humanity, because it's our fault her folks didn't know how to act. But then Ikki came along and turned her into a brother-loving freak just by saying she made a mistake one random afternoon. While she goes on to spend most of her day fighting random magic users as practice, Alice meets up with Ikki and Stella to ask about Tauka. After Ikki tells him that they barely got any details since she was so busy after saving them, Alice explains that it shouldn't be a problem since Shizuku specifically chose to spar against lightning users since Tauka uses it as well. Stella then asks if Shizuku will really be okay since her water abilities put her at a great risk, but Alice tells her not to worry because Shizuku actually uses the purest form of water, which luckily keeps her safe from the risk of getting fried by a lightning bolt. After Ikki tells them that he will be okay with the results as long as Shizuku remains safe, Stella waits until she completes her sparring sessions before meeting her in the bathroom to ask if she is nervous. Shizuku then admits that going up against the supposedly strongest student is a lot to process, but promises that she feels good enough to give it her all, so Stella wishes her luck and promises to come cheer for her before running off. Just then, Alice shows up to do the exact same thing, but instead of brushing him off, she takes him outside to talk about how Ikki doesn't recognize her as a true warrior yet, which is why he is so worried. Like always, Alice tries to make her feel better with a lie, but then he remembers that they are talking about the strongest baddie on campus, so he decides to accept reality for once and listens as Shizuku deludes herself into thinking she actually has a chance. The next day, the entire school floods the arena as they all get excited to see Tauka fight against the undefeated newbie. Nene also decides to join the announcer just because of how rare it is to see such a matchup, but after signaling the start of the fight, they both watch in confusion as both Shizuku and Tauka remain frozen in their stance. While everyone tries to figure out what is going on, Ikki commends Shizuku on making the smart choice because taking a step closer would put her in range of Tauka's deadliest attack, a one-swing move she has always used to take out her opponents. When Stella asks how she lost in the previous tournament if she is so powerful, Ikki explains how her opponent essentially kept running like a mouse in a cat's cage until his long-range spear attack took her down. After he says that Shizuku's best bet is to use a similar tactic, she finally makes the first move and covers the arena in ice to make it difficult for Tauka to move, but Tauka starts gliding like an ice skater and fires off a flurry of lightning blasts to knock Shizuku off balance. However, the Ice Princess manages to remain on her feet and eventually freezes Tauka in place before attacking with an iceberg the size of the moon. By some divine level miracle, Tauka makes it out without a single scratch, but tensions start to rise across the arena as all the other students realize that Shizuku is actually on equal footing with her. However, when Tauka suddenly uses a lightning-fast skill to attack, Shizuku loses the initial wave of confidence and tries to figure out what she just did, only to end up taking a second supersonic slice that tears into her arm. For some reason, Stella and Alice claim that they can clearly see Tauka's moves, so Ikki explains that she is using a special breathing technique that makes it impossible for her opponent to dodge until she gets close enough. Just as he remembers the day Nin used the exact same skill on him, she shows up and demonstrates it by grabbing Stella's melons before Kurono also shows up just to tell them that there is no way Shizuku is winning unless she has something else up her sleeve. After hearing this, Stella remembers her promise to cheer and yells at Shizuku at the top of her lungs until she regains a little bit of confidence and activates a healing skill to preserve the rest of her energy. Unlike her usual style of fighting, she starts creating clones to distract Tauka and focuses on spreading her magic across the arena until a thick fog plunges the entire floor into darkness. Using this, Shizuku sends even more clones against Tauka and charges up her sword for a secret technique, but just as she gets close enough to land the winning blow, Tauka activates her trump card and cancels out the fog with a single slice. At that moment, Shizuku drops the sword and passes out, automatically giving Tauka the win. Later that night, she wakes up in the infirmary and immediately asks for space, so Ikki heads out with Stella and tells her not to worry on the way out because Shizuku is about to start her villain arc. Meanwhile, Alice refuses to leave the room and reminds her that she doesn't have to act tough with him before pulling her in for a hug and holding tight while she breaks down in tears. Around the same time, Itsuki calls Mamoru to his office to discuss a new plan against Ikki. After winning another match days later, Stella goes on a walk with Ikki to talk about their promise to fight again at the top, but then they skip all the small talk to suck face without realizing that a creep has been taking pictures of them. Later on, Kurono calls him to her office to ask if he knows anything about Mamoru, who turns out to be a member of the International Federation of Knights. After he tells her that Mamoru frequently visits the family home since he works closely with Itsuki, she tells him they recently found him snooping around the academy, which means he is probably looking for a reason to get Ikki expelled. Ikki then offers to leave if his presence is causing trouble to the academy, but Kurono stops him from completing the sentence and reminds him of her promise to protect every student regardless of who they are. Hours later, he meets up with Stella again, but instead of smooching, they walk into the student council office and find Tauka on the floor with her cake factory exposed. After scolding Misogi and the others for littering the place, she tries to introduce herself in a respectful manner, but Stella tells her to start by fixing her skirt. Moments later, they all get to an orphanage and Misogi explains that he and Tauka actually grew up in one before their powers led to a better life in the academy. As they spend the rest of the day playing with the kids and feeding them, Ikki notices a strange sense of happiness from Tauka and eventually asks Misogi, who then explains that taking care of the orphans is the source of her power and motivation. Upon hearing this, Ikki tries to figure out where his motivation comes from but remains confused until he and Stella get back to the academy. Just then, Alice, Shizuku, and Kagami run up to show them a viral new printout, making it sound like they have been engaging in unholy acts all over campus. After reading all the details on how Ikki is a supposedly corrupt student with a bad attitude, Stella burns the paper and tries to take her anger out on something else, but then Mamoru suddenly pulls up and asks Ikki to come with him for an interrogation. As usual, Stella tries to stand up for him since he didn't do anything wrong, but he stops her and promises that everything will be okay before getting into the car. However, his entire life switches to dark mode as he gets arrested just a couple minutes later, and forced to appear in front of a court led by the same guy who has spent his entire life trying to ruin him. When the human walrus asks why he is getting freaky with a princess on campus, Ikki tries to explain that they never actually did anything wrong, but Mamoru quickly tells him to stop talking. Despite this, Ikki still explains that he truly loves Stella and would never go against his moral code for pleasure, so they toss him in a cell. As the days go on, they make Yuri bring the rest of his contestants to the facility to make it harder for him to win, but he still manages to keep his perfect streak while Stella also pushes past all the gossip to make sure their promise stays alive. During lunch several days later, they realize that the rumors about him have gotten even worse, so Stella asks if dating him was a mistake, but Shizuku suddenly attacks and promises to never forgive her if she disrespects the sacrifices Ikki is making just to prove that they actually love each other. After training the next day, Stella decides to help Ikki remember her love by cutting off some of her hair and convincing Yuri to sneak it in for him during one of his fights. When he finally gets the chance to look at it, his confidence returns, so he waits for another court hearing and asks for an audience with Itsuki since he is the one behind it. Surprisingly, they grant his request, so he walks into Itsuki's office and takes a long look at him before realizing that all he has ever actually wanted was to be recognized by his own father. When he decides to speak from the heart and promises that he will keep fighting to make the family proud of him, Itsuki turns to face him and says he always knew he was a good swordsman. This initially surprises Ikki, but the real shock sets in when Itsuki tells him that there is no point to his achievements if he doesn't have real talent or magic abilities. Like that isn't enough, he goes on to explain how he has always wanted nothing more than for Ikki to settle into being a nobody, because his obsession with achieving something great will only make another set of powerless nobodies believe that they stand a chance. After a couple more minutes of verbal abuse, Ikki realizes that he never even meant anything to the family and starts crying, but Itsuki sends him back to the cell to continue repeating the same grueling battles. Days later, Mamoru calls him out again, but this time, they promise to let him continue chasing his dreams if he can defeat Tauka. The following evening, Tauka calls Shizuku to the council office to tell her about the fight and says that she will give it her all even if Ikki is too weak and bruised up to be fighting in the first place. She then asks Shizuku to try convincing him to forfeit the match, since that is the only way out of possibly signing his own death certificate. Minutes later, she returns to her room and tells Alice about everything before asking for his opinion. After he says she is the only one capable of making that decision, she becomes confused because this last fight will determine the fate of Ikki's dreams. The next day, every student in campus flocks to the central arena as the final duels to determine which students get to represent the academy kicks off. However, unlike all the other matches leading up to this, the level of excitement from students reaches new heights as they wait to see Tauka and Ikki take to the stage for what might be the most intense duel in the academy's skill. While they continue talking about who might win, Nini and Kurono see a bunch of news helicopters waiting to broadcast it and realize that Mamoru set it all up to humiliate Ikki. The next moment, an old geezer named Nanju shows up to watch the fight with them, but Nene freaks out upon seeing him because he is actually her master. When he admits that Ikki is the main reason he came to watch, Mamoru asks if it's because of the long-standing feud between their families. They all try to ignore him until he says that Ikki will automatically forfeit the match if doesn't show up in the next few minutes. Upon hearing this, Kurono immediately asks why they didn't bring him from the facility as promised, but Mamoru claims they have nothing to do with it because he suddenly left on his own. By then, Ikki, who has been dragging himself across the road, starts slipping into insanity as his mind splits in two and becomes his biggest hater. However, after refusing to listen to his dark self-hating alter ego, he falls into Shizuku's arms and sees all his fans cheering behind her. When Stella also shows him the medal she got for qualifying into the nationals, he regains some confidence and decides to make her proud by defeating Tauka. Just then, Tauka hears all the students cheering and gets up to fight, so Misogi wishes her luck before she heads to the arena to face Ikki. Upon seeing that he still made it, Mamoru struggles to hide his anger while Alice, who also qualified to enter nationals, joins the girls to watch. Before starting, Tauka tells Ikki that she won't be going easy on him even if his injuries give her an unfair advantage, but he claims it won't be a problem and promises to overpower her. As soon as she summons her sword, he activates his trump card and Shizuku immediately asks if he has lost his mind because always saves it for the last attack, but Stella tells her not to worry because he plans to brute force his way to victory. Tauka notices this and also decides to use her finishing move, but as soon as they both charge in, Ikki sacrifices his blood vessels and every last drop of energy to push past his limits. The next moment, everyone in the arena goes silent and watches in shock as Tauka's sword shatters before she passes out. After Ikki raises his hand to accept the victory, Mamoru completely loses it and runs out to unalive him in broad daylight, but Stella smacks him away like a worthless bowling ball before running up to hug Ikki. While Shizuku and the others watch with excitement and cheer him on, he suddenly asks if she would like to be in his life forever, causing another wave of shock to spread through the arena, and everyone struggles to believe that he just proposed to a princess while being broadcasted to the entire nation. After Stella accepts his proposal with a kiss, her dad calls Itsuki to express disappointment over the fact that he spent all these years trying to destroy his own son. Days later, Tauka presents Ikki and all the other winners as the academy representatives for nationals, and after the usual glazing, she makes Ikki their captain and calls him up to receive the flag. She then claims to be happy that he defeated her with a single move, and he also thanks her for helping him realize that men are always stronger before accepting the flag and finally receiving all the praise his dad deprived him of all these years. Later on, he and Stella meet up to finally get freaky with each other, but Shizuku and her sausage-loving bestie show up as usual to interrupt them. Thanks for sticking around until the end, you absolute legend. Comment RIP Ikki down below to confuse all the weak ones who couldn't last to the end. Like, subscribe, and click on the screen to watch some of our other exciting videos. Until next time, stay awesome, stay AniGeek.